two types, qualitative and quantitative, and how we will distinguish which data is required for our research and how to collect and what are the sources of collection of data and what are the importance of both the data type, that is qualitative and quantitative. So in this chapter, we are going to cover the introduction, that is about the data type. Then the second, data and the research process. Third is secondary data. What is the need and usage of this secondary data? Then sources of secondary data, from where we will get that data. Then advantages and limitations of secondary data, and the last one is sources of primary, and it was the advantage which to be known by the researcher before going to using the secondary data. Then we are coming to the primary data, sources of primary data, then advantage and limitations of primary data, then methods of collection of primary data, sources of error in primary data collection, then summary of this chapter. So after the completion of this unit, we are going to be able to explain the necessity and usefulness of the data collection, distinguish between primary and secondary data. We will be able to identify the sources of secondary and primary data that should be distinguished clearly, and we will also be examining the reliability, suitability, and adequacy of secondary data set. Then, after finishing that, we can take the appropriate and advantages and limitations of primary and secondary data both, and describe different methods of collecting primary data with their merits and demerits. After that, we can access the sources of error in primary data collection, as it is conducted by a human being, so there is a chance of error. So in introduction, we can say one of the most important asset that organizations have nowadays is data. So the most powerful is data in marketing research also. The more data you have about your consumers or on your products, the better you can comprehend their interests, needs, and wants. So your ability to meet and exceed your customers' expectations, as well as develop appealing messaging and products or services, is improved by this insight. So, information technology, especially the internet, has revolutionized marketing research by enabling the collection of real time data much faster than traditional method. Now, it has become more easier to access the data than the traditional methods. New technologies and widespread use of personal communication device also like smartphones have made data collection quicker, cheaper, and more effective. We can say in our fingertip we can give a data set completely within 10 to 20 minutes. At the same time, a receiver also getting the data what is required from the respondent easily through these gadgets like our computer system, like our smartphones. All these devices now are helping us to quickly receiving the data as well as quickly providing the data. However, these same devices also present challenges as features like caller ID and call blocking act as these are these two things like caller ID and call blocking. What they are doing, they are acting as a gatekeepers that can prevent researchers from reaching potential respondents. So this highlights a dual effect of technology on data collection, both enabling it and creating new barriers. So, in this unit, the various data types used for marketing research will be discussed along with their role in the research process. Additionally, the primary and secondary data sources as well as the basic data collection methods will be discussed in this unit. At the same time, errors of various forms typically corresponds with particular data collection types and methods will be discussed. Whether the data were obtained through observation or communication means, these will also be covered in this unit. So coming to the second part of the unit, that is data and the research process. How data is important and how it affects the research process. We, in the right hand side of the slide, we can see one figure, that is 5.1, how it is and how we have prepared this data and the same way that it is working. The first one is define research objectives. In our previous chapter, we discussed how and when we will be able to define our objectives. Once the research objectives is defined, then we can go for identifying information needs. So once we know my questions, then I can be able to find what are the sources or where the information I will get, or what is the information is required. Then once I understand that, then formulate research design. So after getting the information needed, identification, then I'm moving to the formulation of research design, which we have also covered in our next chapter, next unit. Then that after that formulation of research design, we are going to identify. What to identify? Now, whether the research or whether the problem is requiring the secondary data or it is primary data required. So here only we are thinking about data. Suppose we are not getting any kind of data or we have insufficient data, then also we will never be able to conclude our research, or we cannot do the end or solution for my research problem. So here two types of data is, it is clearly visible here in the fourth stage, that is secondary data needed and the primary data needs. So secondary data sources having again two types, that is search and analyze internal data in secondary data. Then another one source is that identifying the extent and the type of external data sources we are requiring. And similarly, in primary data, there are three heads. One is respondents who are directly giving us the data. Second is the case studies, the study or the situation we are studying to get the information. Second is experimental, which is purely mathematical or statistical or any experiment we are conducting primarily, which is not done before by anyone or anybody, that is coming under primary data sources. But in secondary data sources, in identify extent and type of external secondary data, there are three heads. That is, one is government, statistical publications, syndicated sources, where always government is publishing the data. And the second one is marketing research and others, any other journals, they are publishing the marketing research or any other related issues. Then the third one is the library sources. It is also publicized. It is already there. If anyone is requiring, then it is available with that person. He or she can access easily to complete the research process. So once the research objective have been identified, then define. The next step is to determine the nature and type of the information required to accomplish these objectives. Then the research process is illustrated in this figure. As I said, what the research objectives define the type and extent of the information needed to achieve the research objective. And the data needs are further clarified by the types of research design chosen by as well as by the nature of the research. So data sources are categorized as secondary or primary. So both cannot be the same. These are two different sources of data. Secondary data is pre-existing information that is to be collected for the other purposes, while primary data is gathered specifically for the current research problem. So primary means it is first-hand data, we can say, but the same way, same platform for secondary data, we can quote a line that it is a second-hand data. Second-hand means the data has been collected by someone else or it is published or used by someone else. The data is there and now it is my requirement to access such kind of data. That is why I am accessing the data. So it means the same data is now for me, it is secondary. But the secondary data, when it is collected first time for someone else, by someone else, it was primary for that person. So the first step in the data collection should always to be to check existing secondary data. So new data collection should only be initiated after thorough review of what is already available, and this can often fulfill the research needs. So this approach helps to avoid redundant efforts and makes the research process more efficient. Qualitative and quantitative and qualitative approach. Typically, qualitative research is categorized as being unstructured, whereas quantitative research is categorized as being structured. So, the following factors should determine whether to use a qualitative or quantitative approach. So there are some approach I have mentioned here. What are the situation? What are the approaches where we will go for the qualitative data, and what are the purposes or situation where we will go for the quantitative data? So the purpose of your research, like exploration, confirmation, or quantification, if it is, or you can say application of the results, like formulation of policy or comprehensions of the procedure. In that case, while the research process is mostly the same in both, there are differences between quantitative and qualitative research in terms of the techniques used to gather the data, the methods used to process and analyze the data, and the method used to communicate the results. So in 5.2 figure we can see that secondary data can be are of two types, like internal and external. Internally, if we have already recorded few data and it is now going to be used in my research, then this secondary data is known as internal data. But the data I require, it is not existing in my internal source, or I can rely, or I can go for another source to collect, that is called as external data. So both the internal and external data is coming under secondary data. Again, internal data are of three types, that is customers database, then data warehouse and data mining, CRM and database marketing. In the same way, external data is business or non-governmental data source or government data source, or third one is syndicated services. So this generalized figure tells all about the secondary data and what are the different sources, and it is clarify the researcher that what kind of research data is required, so that we will go in that way to collect that sources or access that sources to get my research to be done, and I will reach my the conclusion. So secondary data may also be classified on the basis of whether it is periodic data or it is ad hoc. So the majority of statistics gathered over set periods, we can see here the government data. Basically, it is a statistical type data. So it is recorded by the government, and some media also collecting or quantifying these statistically. So these majority of statistics gathered set over set periods of time, such as census data, data from statistical abstracts of trade and other sectors, price indices, and so forth, are characterized by periodic data. So such kind of data collection or preparation having a period of time. It is not that whenever or whatever we want, immediately we can go for census. No, there is a period. So similarly, the statistical abstract. So there is a period. At that period only they are going to publish. So we have to wait for that. So these kind of data are also secondary data and is also known as periodic data. So, on the other hand, ad hoc data refers to data collected from a particular project report. So, it is known as ad hoc because the project is very temporary and the data collected for that project is known as ad hoc data. So, identifying the source from which such data can be accessed usually requires an external research. So, finding out firsthand a customer's attitudes towards specific products or services, evaluating the advertising effectiveness, determining the job satisfaction of employees, and determining the quality of service provided by a service professional are all examples coming under the primary data source. It means, as we defined earlier, that what is primary data? Now, for any kind of purpose, any kind of solution, or for any kind of research problem or research project, if we are going to collect the data fresh or first hand from the respondent which has not yet collected or used, that is coming under primary data source. So in the third step, we are going to discuss the secondary data and what is the need actually, or is there any usage of this kind of data. So we can say the sources of secondary data considers what kind of research objectives is. As we have given two types of data in research, marketing research, it means some, in a time point we may require sometimes secondary data. For another project, it may be needed first and data mandatory. So it is the responsibility of the researcher that to identify the objective, as per the objective to identification of the data source. What kind of data actually required to fulfill my objective or to solve my research problem in my marketing research. So you need to access the potential market size for Teflon coated packaging cases in the country. So this is one example. Another example we can discuss also, as a manufacturer of frost-free refrigerator. So you wish to create a nationwide system for setting sales codes statewide. So when frost-free refrigerator was not there. So the same way before launching also we required some fresh data. It is primary data, no doubt. But after manufacturing of or manufacturation of this frost-free refrigerator, we wish to create a nationwide system for setting sales codes statewide. It will coming under the secondary data. The third example is, as a manufacturer of automotive batteries, you wish to determine the potential market for battery replacements and create methods for establishing national, state and district-wide sales codes. So this is coming under secondary data, as because secondary data is only the way to solve such kind of problem, for a researcher. So you want to forecast prospective wholesale and retail sales of A4 Xerox paper in 2023. It is also required such secondary data. No doubt we can go for this primary data, but if we are going to primary data, then it is a loss of time, money, and manpower. So you should remain in the secondary data. And the last but not the least, to locate a new distribution center for the spare parts of your four-wheeler products. So you are required to choose a location in Western Uttar Pradesh, for example. So in that case also we go for the secondary data to know all about the situation for where a distribution center to be located. So, monitoring research involves continuously tracking a program or phenomenon and its related variables. So, researchers also watch for environmental changes that could affect their subject. So, this type of research primarily relies on internal and secondary data sources, such as according to records for sales and responses. Analyzing this idea along with Salesforce reports on consumer behavior and can provide early warning about potential problems for success for a product in the market. However, even the conclusive studies, secondary data may be employed for comparisons. So you might prefer to compare the industry trend in terms of marketing spendings and sales, which with the position of your own company or the company's position throughout the state with that of a few of its specific competitors. Then discussing about the sources of secondary data, what are the different sources are there on which we can rely also, and what are the authorized, they are the authorized sources from where we can get the data. The first sources, basically the published source. Under that, as we saw in the diagram, there is a government source which is publishing the data periodically. There are some journals, there are some magazines, there are some libraries. They are having the data from in a huge, or you can say in a large size. So the first source of secondary data is government organizations and officials publications. Under that, the statistical abstracts we can consider. So we can see here in terms of secondary microeconomic statistics, the union government's body of publications is by far the most important. Actually, it is published by only Government of India. So this data sources can be this data source has been used by marketing researchers to define sales areas and routing plans, as well as to estimate market potentials and sales predictions, which ascertains distributions, penetration, and determine the location of the intermediate and final outlet. So government data have become more varied and in depth over time, which has boosted their usefulness for marketing research. So under that, the first one is government source is population statistics, that is coming under census. So since 1871 to 1872, India has collected population statistics every 10 years. So census data with regards to the marketing research function is the most significant source of national population statistics, and its fundamental characteristics primarily demographic and economic. Then the second one is the as discussed statistical abstract of the India. The Central Statistical Organization CSO publishes this publication annually. Each year it is published by the Government of India, and it contains statistics from various sectors of the Indian economy in India, and the statewide statistics for these economic variables are also furnished periodically in statistical abstract. Then third source of secondary data by Government of India is the economic survey. The economic survey of India is a yearly financial report that analyzes and provides comprehensive statistical data on all sectors, including industrial, agricultural, and industrial production, employment, prices, and exports, among others. So it covers all the sectors in India. It reviews the economic development in India over the previous fiscal year. The Economic Survey of India is prepared by Economics Division of the Department of Economic Affairs of the Finance Ministry under the overall guidance of the Chief Economic Advisor, and is released a day before the Union Budget is presented in Parliaments. Then the fourth one is monthly statistics on the production of the selected industry. The Central Statistical Organizations releases monthly information on output, installed capacities, and stock positions in a few industries to fill the gap between the census conducted on the data published. Then the fifth one is trade statistics. The Directorate General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, compiles monthly statistical of commercials, intelligence and statistics, and publishes data on the import and export of goods in terms of their quantity and value, classified as received from or sent to centers of consignment. Then the sixth government source of secondary data is publication from foreign governments or international organizations. The significant publication come from the international organization including UNO, FAO, WHO, UNESCO, ILO, and the Yearbook of Labor Statistics, which is issued by the Statistical Office of the United Nations. So, the secondary data offered by such sources is accurate, but in addition to the other considerations, one must pay close attention to the units of measurement because they substantially differ from the country to another in terms of weight, currency, and other factors. Other secondary sources are the library sources of marketing data include whole data documents and reports, books, periodicals, journals, magazines, and newspapers. Reports prepared by the various universities, historical documents, diaries, letters, unpublished biographies, autobiographies, individuals, research project, reports, and trade associations publication is also coming under the secondary data sources. Then under that, there is a data warehouse and data mining. In secondary data, the most important part is data warehousing and data mining. What does it mean? Let us discuss in that thing in under this subheading. The data from several operating systems in the organization is consolidated into a single central database known as a data warehouse. So what we are doing with data warehouse now, we are compiling or considering all the data receiving from different routers in a place that is called data warehouse. The process of analyzing such big database known as data mining. So when we are processing or process the analysis of this big data is called data mining. Calls for specialized knowledge and resources. So the large data sets are analyzed using powerful computers, advanced statistical softwares, and other tools of data mining, which is most important part when we after collection of the data in the warehouse. Then the third one is customers database, where transferring raw sales data to a computer such as that found on sales calls reports or invoices is frequently the first stage in the creation of the customer database. Additionally, information on customers is collected from various sources like warranty cards and loyalty programs. This information is supplemented by demographic and psychological data about the customers from other secondary sources. So these customer based databases are kept in a data warehouse. So basically data warehousing means there is a storage capacity, or you can say that is a space where keeping all the received data at the same place, which is a very large in size. So coming to the fifth parts of the unit of data collection, qualitative and quantitative, this is advantages and limitations of secondary data. As we discuss the different sources of secondary data, then we must, as a researcher, we must know what are the advantages of research, secondary data in research. At the same time, what is the limitations of the secondary data in research. So, under the advantages of secondary data, the main benefit of secondary data is resource efficiency. Means it provides both financially and in terms of time also. As we know, secondary data means everything ready-made is there. So, for collection of secondary data, it requires less time, less manpower, less human being to collect the data. So it's primary research, the sample frame, sample size, data collection instruments, printing of the data collection instrument, which is nothing but your questionnaire in the case of field studies, editing after collection of the data, the process is editing, tabulating, then coding and analyzing of the data. These are steps are not here in the secondary data sources, which is very costly and time consuming also. Different skilled personnel is required in the secondary data to complete these kind of steps. On the other hand, secondary data can be quickly and economically gathered, as we discussed, quickly, very less time consuming, and economical as less manpower is required. So we are spending very less money in the secondary data for by the researcher from published or compiled studies. Then under these advantages, we can go for the limitations for secondary data. We can see here, although the economy and having access to to comparatively unbiased data collection are important advantages. So there are two fundamentals problems that must be solved before secondary data can be used effectively. So these are the challenges which I have cast here. The problem of the data accuracy is one, that once a suitable secondary data sources has been identified, it is crucial to access the accuracy of the data in the context of the current research problem. Then, in identifying the data source, we can say secondary data may be obtained from original source of from where another secondary sources or from another secondary sources, but data must be gathered from the original sources as much as possible, since you may then be able to access the research methodology that is the original researcher used. So that is one, the most important thing is identify the data source. And when the secondary data sources are used, not only are the technique of the original sources details unavailable, but errors occurring at the secondary sources could also have an important to the on the accuracy of the original data. So, examining the purpose of for which the data was published, we must know before going for the secondary data. So, it is most important to use caution when using sources that publish in order to promote the interest of a specific group or for commercials, politicals, or social objectives. So, similar to this, data produced to increase sales spreads a certain propaganda or advance the opinions of a particular interest group is only useful to the extent that it is carefully accessed in light of the publication's intended audiences. And in the access of the source in terms of the quality of the data expected, it is necessary to determine the organization that collected the data as well as that organization's capacity to obtain the required data. Before accepting or accessing the data, we must think whether the capacity is sufficient to record the data. For example, the Internal Revenue Department is significantly more likely to produce accurate information regarding income and expenses simply because it has the authority to do so. So, these kind of drawbacks, we can say, or we can say the limitations are there to be cast in the secondary data source. So, we must be very careful before going to the secondary data. Then data fitness problem. The another problem is data fitness. What do we mean by data fitness? Let us know. The problem here refers to the suitability of the secondary data. Whether the secondary data which I am going to collect or which the researcher is going to collect it from the another sources, is it suitable for the researcher? It may happen that the same data is suitable for that sources, for that persons or that organization, but is it suitable for the researcher who is going to rely on that data which is primarily collected by another but it is secondary for the researcher? Is it reliable? Is it fit for the researcher for the research problem? So secondary data which has been compiled for other purposes is rarely completely relevant to the information needs for the problem at hand. So even when they are relevant, the degree of fitness to a given research problem may be impeded by units of measurement and class definitions and ethical research. So the data fitness checking is depending upon these three things. One is units of measurements, then second is class definitions and recency. So the variance of units of measurement employed for a particular variable is one of the most frequent constants of secondary data. Let us example this statement, understand this statement. If you want to base your market estimates on a realistic estimate of disposable income, you might find that depending on the source, income may have been estimated by individual, household, or tax returns. If more than one of these sources must be used, the information can only be used as a rough approximation due to different measurement of units. It means what is my measurement? According to that, I should go for that secondary data which fits to me, otherwise not. So measurement of data is differs from problem to problem, organization to organization, and project to project. Then sources of primary data. It was all about the primary secondary data. What are the sources? What are the limitations? What are the advantages? We discussed, and we know that if, secondary data is also a part, a serious part, which to be understood by the researcher. We discussed. Now the second type of data is primary data. So from the primary data, we are going to understand what are the different sources of the primary data. But before that, we must understand what is primary data. Primary data is that data which is required at the time of research, but the same data is collected by the researcher or the investigator from the respondent directly, which the or we can say that data has not been used and collected by any other persons, which is otherwise known as the first hand data. First time, first handly, I am as a researcher going wanting for that data and going to collect that data, and after collection I am the only person authorized to use the data first time. This is the most important thing. Although almost all marketing research problems involves the use of some secondary data, as discussed earlier, both exploratory and conclusive research scenarios demand the use of significant amount of primary data also. So primary data are primarily collected through respondents, analogous case studies and research experiments. So the three dimensions are there to collect the primary data. The first one is respondents, who is the person connected or to the problem. That person directly giving the data or the information to the researcher, or analogous case studies, and the third one is research experiments. So let us discuss the respondents. So the most significant source of primary marketing data is by far respondents. So it is the most important stakeholder of the research. Marketing decisions are distinguished by the fact that they almost always involve in some way or another the prediction of the behavior of market participants, whether they be customers, individuals, users, marketing intermediaries, or competitors. All are called as respondents because they are the person from where we will collect the primary data. Then past behaviors. On the assumption that there is a reasonably consistent relationship between past and future behavior patterns, past behavior is widely utilized as a predictor of future behavior. So to gain a sense of how the product or service is consumed, information on respondents' past behaviors is sought, including their exposures to the understanding and communication tools, their consumption habits and experiences with competitors, companies, goods and services, etc. Is known as past behavior, which is going to affect the future behavior of the customer. Then the second point, sub points is intentions. Intentions means the self predictions of intended act to be taken in the future are known as intentions likely actions. So they are examples of the respondent's information that is very commonly requested. However, since intention only depicts concurrently valid claims, actual behavior can be altered by events beyond the respondent's control, such as price adjustments or the arrivals of a new compelling competing brand. So the utility of intentions data is much better as a predictive tool. When intentions given the conditions of purpose can be assigned probability each. Then another subheading is attitudes and opinion of the respondent, a predisposition mental condition to act as a particular way is presented by attitude and beliefs. For instance, a respondent's declaration that he prefers freshly ground coffee to instant mixes provide insight into his future actions. So when faced with the decision to purchase coffee, it is the idea of the respondent. The most effective application of attitude research in marketing are in product design and development and also in advertising media. So, information on attitudes and opinions is gathered using both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. Then the third something that is affecting the primary data is lifestyles. So, using lifestyles to segment markets and reposition products is becoming more common, and the targeting positioning strategies are well matched to the customer profile. So, the development of lifestyle profiles involves a systematic examination of values, attitudes, opinions, and interests, as well as income, all of which can be obtained from respondents using communication method alone or in conjunction with observation technique. So lifestyle is also most important part for the respondent. According to the lifestyle, the respondent will behave or give information as a primary data. Then after understanding the primary data, the first second data source is primary data from analogous situations or case studies. So the case study or a case history which emerged from the behavioral sciences is widely used in modern marketing research. An extensive investigation is conducted to completely examine the situations using scenarios similar to or pretend the problem situations. So the focus of this case study is to identify important variables, describing how they related to one another, and perhaps defining the opportunity or problem in order to recommend different approaches to the decision marketing access. So the case study approach is often applicable in circumstances where multiple variables extracts. For example, we can say we have cited three or four examples of case studies, like while analyzing the sales, how sales performance changes when a new competitors enter into the market. Second is comparing a performance level in various markets. Transitional phases such as the analysis of sales territories where the company is switching its distribution channel from indirect to direct sale. So these are the situations where we should rely on the case study. Case study is the appropriate thing to give solution to such kind of problem. Now, simulation. Simulation is also a source of primary sources of data. Is a marketing simulation is a partial depiction of the marketing system, and that focuses on a certain component, and it is mostly a computer-based technique. Though through the manipulation of the independent variables like the marketing mix or situational factors and the observational of their effects on the dependent variables. So it would require the representation of the phenomenon's priorities and the interactions between variables in the data inputs. Then the last one is the experimentation. Experimentation stage, which is mostly used investigate cause and effect relationship among the marketing variables. Is also a rather rich source of primary data. While we are discovering the cause and effect relationship between these variables, we purely require some primary data, and it is also a source of the primary data. So, marketing experiments are carried out in a manner that is quite similar to that of other scientific investigations. Now, coming to the advantages and limitations of the primary data. Typically, primary sources offer more in depth information than secondary sources. This is partially due to the ability to more precisely adjust the data collection method and tools to be researchers' informational requirements. Additionally, this increases the analysis adaptability to the current research goal. It is the first and foremost important advantages of primary data. So the researcher can choose the proper unit for this purpose with a considerably greater degree of fit, since he has more flexibility on doing so, because terms and units can be specified more accurately in the collection of primary data, as because the researcher is going to collect the data first time as per the requirement. The researcher will fit the parameters, measurement and units for the collection of data, as because everything in the researcher's hands. It is not secondary data that is already done. The parameters, units has already set by anybody else. It may fit to me or my research, or may not be fit to me and my research. So such kind of difficulties are not here in the primary data. So in the case of secondary data, the researcher may not have much control over it, as we discussed. It was controlled by anybody else, other source, other authorities. So we are just here to take some parts. Maybe that entire parts is not coming to or not fit to me or my research. So when using primary data, the user may access the level of confidence. He may place it in the data because he is fully aware of the methodology and tools that were utilized. So methods of primary data collection. We must know what are the different methods are there to collect the primary data. So when we need informations from others, we either ask them directly or watch what they do or what are the observations. And after that, formal research has simply refined these two everyday methods of data collection. One is communication method that involves a direct dialogue, whether spoken or written, with the person providing the information, or you can say that in the respondent. And another one is the contrast observation method. One is communication method, we are directly communicate with the respondent, and the second one is observation method that involves monitoring a subject's behavior without any interference. Means we are here to observe only. We are not communicating, we are just observing. So the key difference lies in the presence and absence of the direct interaction. It is very clear that communication method means respondent is in front of us, a respondent with respondent we are here to communicate, where the observation method may be respondent in front of us but we are not communicating. We are just observing what is the behavior, what he or she is doing, what is the attitude, all these things we are just observing. So on that method of collection, the first method is communication method. That is, under communication method, we have interviews. Interviews in marketing research are by far the most common method that data collection. Interviewing means communicating. One method. Under that, structured and direct method is coming. Second, unstructured and direct means not involving the use of a pre-decided questionnaire. Unstructured means everything or every question has not yet decided. But in structured, what is involving the use of a structured formal questionnaire as well as an interviewer. Interviewer is there, the person who is going to take the interview or collect the information is there with the structured and framed questions with him or her. But in the unstructured, direct communication is there, but not a structured questionnaire with the interviewer. who is going to ask the questions to the respondent while collecting the data. And the third one is structured and indirect. Structured questionnaire is structured, but it is indirect one where the respondent or a to a non-personal ambiguous data collection situation which is later interpreted. Hmm. Then the fourth one is unstructured and indirect, where the respondent is asked to respond to non-personal ambiguous situation, but where the interviewer has considerable degree of freedom in modifying or altering, as because it is indirect. The interviewer is not in front of the respondent. The person who will give the information or the person who is collect the information, they are not in front. So it is indirect and unstructured also. So there is a chance that the interview the respondent can modify anything or can alter any the situation. So discussing the structured and direct survey, we can say structured questionnaire very common or commonly communicated method of collection of data. There, where we are using using the questionnaire and gathering specific information like consumer behavior or what influences people's brand choices. So these questions are asked at that time of the structured and direct questionnaire survey. Under that, the one thing is coming that on willingness of respondent to provide information. Sometimes it happens. Using an interviewer with a questionnaire can be inefficient and interesting for the respondent when people often refuse to answer personal questions about their income, like values or habits, which can create gap in the data. So these uncooperative responses can negatively affect the overall reliability of the research. Then second is influence of the questioning process. Sometimes it happens also surveys can yield inaccurate information because the survey environment is artificial. The respondents may give answers, but they think the interviewers want to hear, especially if the truth is embarrassing or hurts their egos. So some participants also do not take process seriously, providing answers simply to entertain or shock the interviewers. Shock the interviews. So this can lead to the unreliable data, which is very flawed and research conclusions. Coming to the second one of the second method of collection of primary data, that is unstructured direct interviews. This approach does not use questionnaire that is formally structured. Only broad guidelines on the kind of information sought are provided to the interviewer, and the interviewer therefore has a lot of freedom to choosing the questions as well as the wording the and order that appear most relevant for a particular interview. So these interviews, which are frequently utilized in the exploratory research investigations, are helpful in gaining a greater understanding of the problem and identifying the areas that need more investigations. Then the third one is structured and unstructured indirect interviews. To overcome issues with direct questioning, researchers use indirect projective techniques from psychology. So these methods ask respondent to describe ambiguous and non-personal situations. So the idea is that their descriptions will reveal their own unconscious feelings, values, and desires. So common examples include word associations, sentence completion. So all these things are coming under that. Interpreting pictures, these techniques are particularly useful for understanding the customer motivations. So what is word association test? Now the word association test is a projective technique where the respondent is given a word and asked to say the first word that comes to mind. So the response reveals their domain associations and perceptions related to the stimulus. Similarly, the sentence completion test, the sentence completion test which was created as an extension of the word association test, tasks the correspondent to swift finish the sentence after being given their initial pages. The sentence completion test also employed in the marketing research to study and try to determine why people buy cars. This can be one example on sentence completion test. Then thematic appreciation test is there in the collection of primary data. Here, where the test involves showing one or more pictures or cartoons to the respondent and asking them to describe the situations or assume the role of one of the people shown in the picture or cartoon. So that is also one very interesting way of collection of data. In most cases, the picture depicts one or more people in an ambiguous situation, and it is anticipated that the respondent will interpret the situation in line with his own personality. Similarly, media used indirect and direct interviews. As we know, sometimes as per the situation done in personal interview, and sometimes online surveys are there for quick response, and they may be used for both structured and unstructured interviews. Coming to the third one, the observation method, second method of data collection, that is observation method, that we are observing. Another type of data collection method it is that it is very accurately and carefully monitor the respondent's behavior rather than asking the questions. Even though prior behavior cannot be seen, the results of those behaviors can be taken. Instead of asking what brand of television do you own, is it white or black? Is it controlled remotely or not? It would be easier to examine the set of watch, how it is used. So these are some questions they are asking for the observation method. So manually observation approach includes the use of the trained observer who makes the records, that is who is the actual buyer of the product in the question. Then to what extent do they seem to have a predetermined idea of buying the product? How many of them looked up for the price, compared it with that of the competitors? So these are the questions we can keep in our section, in the type of data method of data collection of primary data to record from the source. So the in our last but not the least is sources of errors in the primary data. As we are collecting the data primary manually, so there is a chance of collection of chance of error. So error basically, sampling error is there, response error is there, and non-response error is there. So sampling error means, sampling error as the name suggests, in an error in the section selection of process that cause the sample no longer representative of the population. So in that case, sampling error occurs. So it is clearly and accurately take care of the sampling size and sampling frame, so that we can omit or we can overcome that sampling error. Then response error. Response error says when the response reported value of a variable differs from the actual value. So we include both communication and observations error here. We have already discussed two cases of response error, and respondents' ability or willingness to provide accurate information due to the time factor, due to which the response error generally occurs. And the third one is ambiguity, which is a source of error that is raised in both communication and observation also. So ambiguity is described as an error mode and interpreting behavior or words. This is all about the error which is generally or you can say possibility of occurrence in the field of research. So in conclusion, we can say, if we will sum up the chapter in types of data collection and the errors of the data, we can say the data, there are many kind of data. First of all, we have to take care of the research or the project which we are considering or which we are going to conduct. So what kind of data is required, that is discussed in that chapter, and the sources of secondary and primary data have been discussed, which is to be understood first by the researcher. Then the two fundamentals method of collecting data, namely communication and observation, and the different variations for which the errors are occurring. All these things we are covered in the chapter. So thank you for this chapter. The next chapter we will discuss about the different kind of sampling. Thank you.